Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar this morning, our final feedback webinar to discuss how to open our mosques safely. We have a really packed schedule this morning, so I won't take too much of your time before we get started, but just to remind everyone to please keep yourselves on mute throughout this session, that we will have a question and answer session, and all questions can be asked via the chat facility. So I would now like to call on Hassan Judy, Deputy Secretary General of the MCB, to start, please.
Thank you, Zainab. I'll just start with some citation from the Quran. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. He said, "O my Lord, expand my breast for me, and make my affair easy for me, and loosen the knot from my tongue, that they may understand my word." Surah Taha, chapter 20, verses 25 to 28. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all. Welcome to this final of 4 webinars that the Muslim Council of Britain has been hosting this week about this very important and essential topic. My name is Hassan Judy. I'm part of the leadership team at the MCB. My day job, I work as an engineer in the energy sector. And in the evenings and weekends, like many of yourselves, volunteering for your own organizations, masjids, charities, associations. Very passionate about making sure that our communities are as well prepared and as geared up as possible for the challenges, not only in the coming days and weeks, but also in the months ahead and years ahead. So very brief introduction to give context, then we'll be rapidly moving on to our wide range of panelists who have joined us from a number of the national Muslim associations this morning. So as many of you may know, since the beginning of May, the MCB has been consulting with Muslim communities via an online consultation survey, one-to-one feedback meetings, phone calls, to understand what our needs are with regards to reopening and preparing ourselves. And we had over 350 responses to an online consultation at the beginning of May. Based on that, we issued initial draft reopening guidelines for mosques, madrasas, and community centres on Monday, the 18th of May. And to really just get everyone in the mode of thinking about what all the very challenging questions we'll need to be considering. And if those of you who haven't seen, there is a snapshot of that here. This week we've had a number of webinars. Some of you may have joined them earlier in the week by region, North Midlands, South. Our friends and affiliates in Wales and Scotland, Muslim Council of Scotland and Muslim Council of Wales, have also been doing their own sessions, and I'm pleased that they're joining us today as well to share some findings from those. Scotland are having theirs this afternoon. And today is very much about getting the national picture, of course, and we know from our panelists today that there are many masjids that are part of our national associations, key parts of the infrastructure that we have as Muslims in this country, and what is the role that our national associations are already playing and will be playing in the coming days and weeks to help our masjids reopen. I'll cut to the chase, and I'll to tackle what many of you will may have been thinking or concerned about since last night at about 9-10 p.m. Many of you may know about this government press release indicating that they are bringing forward the date for reopening of mosques for individual or private worship only by 3 weeks, approximately till Monday the 15th of June, which is approximately 8 days from today. And many of you may have seen, or you may not, that this morning there was also another press release by the number 10, which gave a bit more guidance, a paragraph description of definition of what individual worship looks like. I think, if Zainab, if you can share on the chat if you haven't already, for those who haven't seen. Suffice to say, I think there's been quite a wide mix of views, or mixed bag of what people feel about it, and there's a strong feeling that it's somewhat impractical, unworkable, difficult to enforce, but these are early days still, and the panelists today, I'm sure, have also been having some discussions with their own respective organizations and may have some views on that. So that will be part of today's discussion, inshallah. And we know that detailed government guidance is expected next week. We don't know exactly when, but they've just said next week. Also, of course, beyond that, all the other wide variety of issues that we cover in this, the guide that will come up in discussion today, around equipment, around cleaning, what does deep cleaning mean, etc., queuing, crowd management, etc., and also communication. It's really important. And this actually came up in one of the webinars earlier this week as well, I think in the Midlands region, where a comment was made that just as much effort that we're perhaps putting into the preparing of the building physically to be COVID secure in line with whatever the guidelines are going to be next week, it's also important to perhaps put just as much effort in communicating what those new rules and conditions will be to our community members, who are ultimately we're going to be asking to come back to use the building in the limited form that they are allowed to do. So just some brief context and some considerations to get us all thinking, and I'll hand back to Zainab now to take us through our panelists for today. Jazakallah.
Thank you so much. And before we move on to our first panelist, I'd just like to confirm that this session is being recorded. It's also being live streamed onto Facebook, and a recording of this session will be uploaded onto YouTube shortly afterwards. All resources discussed in this session are available on the MCB's website, which is mcb.org.uk/coronavirus. If I could now ask Shabir Kausar from Da'watul Islam to join us as our first panelist, please.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Brother Hassan, Jodi, and Sister for organizing this important event to share with the Muslim community as the how do we reopen the mosque in United Kingdom. Alhamdulillah, it's this difficult time we are passing through. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us, to save us from all the difficulties, all the challenges we have. In this unprecedented moment, many mosques, many leadership are considering to reopen the mosque, but at the same time, safety is the main issue. Firstly, Da'wat Islam is one of the national community organizations serving the community for over 40 years. We have branches in major cities, including Birmingham, Bristol, Manchester, and Swansea, to name a few. In terms of mosque opening, I'll share briefly. The mosque is planning to meet this Tuesday to work on the risk assessment, also how to implement the risk assessment and to reopen the mosque. I think every mosque to consider, as including us, to consult with the Sharia experts like imams, and also asking imam to use the videos and khutbahs to create awareness for the new normal after this post-COVID-19. We'll be considering the government guidelines, including we'll consult the legal experts to implement these guidelines. Management operatives like trustees, imams, the directors, volunteers are all involved to make these decisions. And also the important aspects, as you rightly identified earlier, is the risk assessment. And risk assessment would include, in our case, and every mosque would be going to the same thing, consulting the health expert, including Muslim doctors. And one of those, all the suggestions or concerns came on, we need to close the mosque wudu areas just to be safe, and part of that other issues came on. Quran bookshelves would need to be closed for safety, and the prayers initially it has to be only for the 4 prayers only, and this we need to provide sanitizers, bags for shoes, masks, prayer mats. We'll be asking people to bring the prayer mats. Also, to control the crowds, the security guards needs to be employed, or there. Even we at Darul Ummah we have hired or purchased some temperature checks machines so that people can check whether health is generally well. And it should be considered only for adult. And also our mosque chairs thinking of not just one session of Jummah, would be more than one sessions, could be 2 or could be 3 for a safe prayer arrangement. While the mosque closed, Darul Ummah, alhamdulillah, has been able to open a hub to serve the community. And alhamdulillah, just to by the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have wonderful volunteers team led by Khairul Shahid as a coordinator, and many others involved, including Brother Hafiz Rafiq Ahmad, and many others, including our MCB leaderships, Ustad Masood Ahmed. He is also part of the team. In terms of last months, our volunteers included 40 volunteers. They have offered hot food to the families, even children. They have we have received referrals from Tahamblers homes, Tahamblers as well in the Tahamblers areas. We have defending team and all the things there, and that has opened up a partnership with many other organizations like churches, volunteers, even other faith groups like Gurudwara, and many other people are coming in to support the community. Our volunteers include also Neil Jameson of Citizens UK, who was the executive director before, and many others, not just Muslims. We can see volunteers from church, from community, Muslim, non-Muslim, are coming forward to supporting the community. So Alhamdulillah, even though it's a crisis, but this crisis brings in other benefits. That is the way how we see the mosque. Mosque is not just for the prayers, it is to serve the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would now, I'm really sorry, we have a really packed schedule today, so I'm really keen to get through all of our panelists. I'd now like to call Ragad Al-Takriti from the Muslim Association of Britain, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And first of all, I would like to thank the MCB for continuing to organize and facilitate for these important webinars and areas of communication with other organizations and members. And I think that's the most important thing in the pandemic, that it created an atmosphere of unity and guidance. And I believe that they were successful in bringing us all together and feeling that we are on the same page. So Jazakumullah khair for that. Muslim Association of Britain is a grassroots organization, and it has 11 branches across various cities across the UK. We have a number of mosques directly under our leadership and management, and others where we have a strong presence through our members in leadership and amongst the attendees. The paper that was prepared that Hassan Judy spoke about was immensely important in drawing general guidelines for each mosque to take into consideration upon the easing of this lockdown. And we can see that it's happening at a rapid pace, where, for example, today I read something about even easing restaurants and weddings. So suddenly we will find, and that is due to the economic situation in the UK and the worry that many will lose their jobs. But it is very important to remember that guidelines are general guidelines, and we have to customize it to each individual organization or mosque to be able to fulfill. I mean, during the pandemic, of course, it was a challenging time, especially during Taraweeh, Ramadan, and the prayers of Taraweeh and stopping the congregational prayers. And alhamdulillah, as a community, we found that due to the communication that's happened at initial stages with our members, I think everyone came on board, and we even stopped the prayers at mosque a week before. And we don't take pride into that. It's just because the priority for us was the safety of our individuals. And I think now, I mean, through the work that has been done online, and I think that's phenomenal work throughout all organizations that has happened, directed at youth, working with communities, charity projects that especially the youth have been engaged in. It's something for us to be proud of, and to realize that truly we have a great presence and an important role to continue to play following this, or in the aftermath of this pandemic. It is important to realize that now that everything is easing, there's priorities in our work. And the main priority for us as organizations, as mosques, madrasas, and all the rest of the work or the projects that we have are going to wonder and ask, so do we go back to normal? And it cannot. The answer basically is no. We will never go back to normal, at least in the short term coming after the easing of the lockdown. And that is because the main important aspect in all of this is the safety of our members, the safety of the Muslim community and the wider society. So we have to recognize that these general guidelines are going to differ from one mosque to the other. And I'm not going to repeat what's been in it, because I think it's very clear and very important the way it lists what steps you need to take to be able to open up safely. Now, there's going to be pressure, because you've got the imams and the leaders and the trustees who are going to be worried about their responsibilities, and you're going to be pressured by the community who are eager to come back to their organizations and mosques and activities and feel that's it, it's over. But the situation isn't as such, and that's why it's very important to be always in the lead, communicating with your members, telling them why are you taking things either slowly or you're getting, having a faster pace. And I think that's very important to mention, that at the top of all of this, it's the safety of our members. It has to be a customized process according to the mosque or the center or the organization, according to what they have. It has to be dealing with the guidelines done in a gradual kind of process. It can't suddenly happen as a mosque is open, or you can't question mosques that are big and have different kind of different exits, like a small masjid that doesn't have that facility, and you say that mosque opened and this didn't. You have to understand that this will take into consideration the sizes, the congregation, the facilities available, the PPE available, the sanitizers and everything. If they don't, it's better to keep shut at this point in time and not to rush to open. Ongoing communication, I know my time is coming to an end. Ongoing communication is vital. I think webinars such as this is very important. Keep the online things that we're doing going, because we can't just stop suddenly. There's a lot of support that has happened over Ramadan and over the past period. And I think it's vital for us to continue to use this tool to reach out to our community and to keep addressing the important issues to us as mosques, organizations, and why we're doing things. It's very important for us to explain to them. And remember, we're going to have a lot of issues that we have to deal with: mental health issues, economic issues for our members. And I know during the question time, inshallah, things like that are going to come up. So inshallah, I will contribute, because I know my 5 minutes are over.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'd now like to call on Sayyid Amir from Majlis Ulama Shia, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, thank you, sister. I'll try not to repeat the similar points that the sister has said. Pretty much in agreement with that. So a brief one about Majlis Ulama Shia for the people who are maybe less aware of them. Majlis Ulama Shia Europe has been established for 27 years, is a national association, and has approximately 70 Islamic centers and mosques affiliated from the Shia Muslim community of the UK. And during this particularly difficult time, we have been essentially leading the communication to the centers and to the people across the UK, pretty much in the same vein as MCB have been doing. And we are really thankful, for MCB, for their guidance and constant communication that they've kept with us. And essentially,
it is locked down now.
Oh, apologies. I think we've had a slight technical glitch. Say that you're able to unmute yourself. Sorry, yes, now we can hear you. Sorry, please continue.
Okay, Bismillah. Yes, so specifically about the preparation, towards reopening. Before I touch on that, just as all the other organizations, we have really gone out with communication on a weekly basis. We've been trying to keep in touch with the trustees, with scholars, and just yesterday, a official communication has gone out, which has given advice to the trustees and management and scholars of all mosques that although we are waiting for clear guidelines from the government and looking forward to the date of the 4th of July, we must side on precaution as much as possible. This is a time to be patient. There is still many unknowns, although we still need to assist those mosques and centers who may be in a position that they could open. Obviously, like the sister said before me, there are many factors that could make it easier depending on size of your institute, for instance. So also just to get the discussion focus more on the risk assessment side, we definitely have gone out with our communication to focus on centers to begin looking at carrying out risk assessment. Unfortunately, I still believe, although there is a lot of communication out there, there are still quite a few areas which are ambiguous and vague. So there's some assumptions that are being made or having to be made. Although what we have proposed, and our professionals who are working with us are working on a concept which is basically an online calculator specifically to look at the social distancing side within a mosque. So once we've got to the position, we're aiming to get that ready before the 4th of July. We will be sharing that publicly, hopefully through MCB, to get your feedback as well. And also, if any other institute would like to use that, we'd be happy to share that. Because I really believe the social distancing aspect is the bread and butter of the risk assessment. How are we going to overcome that within a closed space? Yeah, so this is one of the concepts that MUS is currently working on. The only other thing I would say is that regarding the risk assessment within our mosques generally, although there is a growing skill set in terms of managing in a more professional manner, there does seem to be a lack of expertise on carrying out risk assessments. So therefore, we have recommended that each mosque and center appoint a safety officer, and this is in line with what MCB, Minhab, and other organizations have also recommended. What we also would like to hear from the other associations would be what they would deem as a minimum criteria or skill set of someone to have that responsibility, because not most trustees and most management of mosques may not have the appropriate skill set. So I would actually appreciate if we can have a discussion around that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the tool that you said that you're producing sounds really helpful, and I'm sure we can disseminate that via the MCB, and it'll come in handy for many mosques. And now let's call on our next panelist, Hamid Azad from the Muslim Community Association, please.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakumullah khairan. Big thank you to MCB for giving leadership in guiding mosques and institutions in this very crucial time, while we are living through one of the most challenging time in our history. And very special thanks for organizing this webinar today. Alhamdulillah, MCA, Muslim Community Association, is a grassroots national community organization with hundreds of branches and units in all over the countries and affiliates across the Europe. Alhamdulillah, we run number of mosques and community centers, and since this pandemic and crisis started, in light with MCB's guidelines and the government guidelines, we have been taking measures and steps to keep our centers, our institutions, and our community safe. And in this practice, the role MCB played, alhamdulillah, this is really wonderful, phenomenal. And on behalf of MCA and the wider community, I'd like to say thank you for this great service. Many points, alhamdulillah, mentioned before me. I broadly actually agree with all of these points and all of these suggestions, alhamdulillah. I think most important thing I'd like to reiterate was in the MCB, assessment and risk assessment. MCB actually mentioned that is the risk assessment side is very, very important. We need to make sure that all our institutions, our centers are safe and secure for our people. One thing we also need to keep in mind that on prayer issue and religious issue, our community, our people are very much emotional. So this is why each center need to calculate and assess the condition of their worshippers and their people, and accordingly, I think each center need to take measure. And that's what we are trying to do as well. All our centers and institutions, we are trying to guide our people. And at the same time, another point I would like to actually re-emphasize, which already came, and MCB is, I know, taking care of this, that is the training volunteers and training staff members of the institutions. This is very, very crucial. And I think not only volunteers and staff, and at the same time, training community worshippers is very important as well. This is why the leading point is the communication, training through communication. And all institutions know what is the condition, what is the level of their worshippers and their members. I think by assessing proper assessment, we need to take initiative to communicate our people, and through communication, we need to actually give them training so that they are not emotional when they come to the mosque. Because it is not for the interest of the mosque, it is not for the interest of the government or MCB or the community, mosque itself. It is for the best interest of the community and best interest of the worshipper. That is what understanding we need to give to our people, inshallah. So for that, I think all mosque and community centers to cater for and to make the necessary arrangement, inshallah. And from MCB side, alhamdulillah, I think you are doing wonderful. I'm not sure if there is anything more to do, to go more widely to the community, to train them, to communicate them, to make them aware about the risk, and especially the point Sister Ragat mentioned. This is actually not that during the pandemic, but the risk is coming in the next phase. We need to aware our people about this. So we cannot be reluctant about this. Okay, pandemic is over, now things are coming easy. No, there's a next wave of pandemic can come, and then if we don't actually behave ourselves, we do not take enough caution, that there will be big risk will be waiting. So that is what I think we need to communicate with our people. And this alhamdulillah, we are trying to actually educate our people and in our all centers, and we are very actively involved in supporting East London Mosque as well, where we are trying to actually do our best. And I hope through this practice and webinars and further communication, I think MCB will be able to guide the community in a bigger way, in a more appropriate way, inshallah. Thank you very much once again. Jazakumullahu khairan for patient hearing.
Thank you so much. And you raise a really important point about the need to continue to exercise caution. And, just because lockdown measures are starting to be eased, that doesn't mean that the pandemic is over, and we still must all continue to be as cautious as possible. I'd now like to call Shakir Nawaz from the Council of Sri Lankan Muslim Organisations in the UK, please. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you very much. It's now, I have a presentation prepared for the masjid thing. Thank you very much for organizing this. There are 3 masjids that represent here: SLMCC, the Sri Lanka Muslim Cultural Center in Harrow, Masjid Slough, and the East London, that is a proposed building. Preparing for safe reopening feedback webinar. I would like to mention that Cosmos, first of all, Cosmos UK, can I have the next slide, please? It's a Muslim organization with 26 expatriate Sri Lankan organizations that major masjid affiliates of Cosmos UK are SLMCC, Masjid Al Jannah, SLMC East Ham, KICC, SLMF. So actually, we have covered affiliates from north to west and south to east in UK, originated in April 2012 to voice, address the Sri Lankan Muslim issues in an unified voice from here in UK. The next slide, please. Now, for more details about Cosmos UK, you can refer cosmosuk.com. Now, on to actions and planning for reopening, what Cosmos has done and what we have engaged in the community. Most of the participants and with the webinars previously held, there were a lot of guidelines were already given. And I'm going to share some of the discussions that we had, actions and planning for reopening, sharing and engaging in discussion with the affiliates about the latest government guidelines and information on reopening mosques, because this is very important to understand. Communication is the most powerful tool in order to make the community understand, the musallis, the management, the leaders, what are the strategies they have made, and sharing good practice guideline posters recommended by various national, international organizations, including MCB. These are some of the actions that we have taken towards our community members and affiliates, because I was asked to specifically speak about what Cosmos has done in engaging the community. So we have found out the risk assessment is the most important part that each masjid has to do. Every organization, masjid, have their own different resources. So just because one masjid has opened or using that open to public does not mean that everyone must do. It depends on the risk assessment of it. So we have to ensure that we all work on that risk assessment criteria, which certainly produced by MCB, and we have to review the employee public liability insurance arrangements, because it is an important factor in this COVID-19 process, because we tend to forget about the employee and public liability insurance arrangement. So we kindly remind all the masjid and organizations to review on that, and adhering to government guidelines and seeking professional advice if required. So that is important as well. On the next slide, now we can see, can you have the next slide, please? Appointing COVID-19 safety officer. I think if I want to stress, this is an important point that everyone must be looking into it, because we don't want to only think about the musallis. We have to think about the musallis, because the mosque is closed for such a long time. Everybody is eagerly waiting for it. But appointing safety officers, security officers, CCTV operators, providing comprehensive training to army of volunteers is paramount. Then action planning and reopening on that. Avoiding minimizing a second wave, because we are expecting, or Alhamdulillah, Allah may prevent it, but we should not be the community that spiked the second wave. So we have management has to strive to continue motivate the volunteers to engage and follow the guidelines, because we tend to forget. There's a new famous saying thing: new brooms sweep well. So we don't want to be like that. So we have to ensure that continuously, until this pandemic is over, we motivate and follow the guidelines thoroughly. And use of technology is important. there were certain suggestions how Jummas can be conducted, whether the various international, even in European masjids have adopting technology to enter register system. For example, now either you can engage in color-coded or registered system to enter or conduct Jummas in 1 or 2 sessions. And following the social distancing layouts, prepare prayer time based on geographical needs and the location. Then finally, conducting individual prayers, congregational prayer. Now we have been issued with the latest individual prayers that we have to discuss further on that, and we have to ensure that how the risk assessment are conducted on these prayers. Each prayers, if suited, open the masjid gradually, phase by phase. Depends on the age, gender criteria, because some are very reluctantly saying that elders and people who are in ladies should be gradually allowed. I think each masjid must do their own risk assessment with the facility. So that is the most important point. And number 10, financial cost implications, because in order to do and change our layouts and follow these instructions, there's a financial cost. So we have to ensure the masjids are reviewing their financial cost implication. And closing was easy, but when opening, consider safety of vulnerable. Imam, muaddins, caretakers, staff, your own family members, volunteers, neighbors, and other stakeholders of community, along with resources of masjids in opening. Because you can't just open because there is a demand from the musallis, because we have to ensure that we cover all the other stakeholders in these criteria when making a decision. I think it is very important, because we know that we have been missing Jummah for more than 12 weeks, consecutive weeks, but there is a big demand for it. But we have to ensure that other stakeholders, the neighbors, are considered in making up this decision. Next slide, please.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry. We are running out of time.
So
if you don't mind, we'll move on to our quick Q&A session, because I'm aware we've got a number more panelists that we need to get through and a number of questions we need to get through. So if I could actually direct our first question to Ragad from the Muslim Association of Britain.
Hello.
So we'll just move on to our question and answer session now quickly. Ragad, someone has said that they found that it's been really difficult to convince elderly people or people with who are high risk or have underlying health conditions to stay at home. And now that we plan to reopen the places of worship, do you have any advice for individuals to be able to convey that message to those people, to maybe have them reconsider attending the mosque?
Yeah. As I said, the main thing in all of this process and how we engaged our communities was through communication and ongoing communication. And I think it's very important to find innovative ways of reaching out, of talking to people, and to get the message across. There's going to be resistance. This is something that we should know, and not everyone will be convinced by a message that others are. So we will find some, but we're hoping to make it in the minority. So the majority wants to engage, because then you could rely on them to move the message forward. Now, of course, there's going to be some steps where you're going to be confronting some members, like, for example, the elderly, who are eager on going to the mosque. But I think if we present to them, why are we preventing them, and who is the priority in all of this process, then there will be conviction, and they will be eager to support you. I'm not saying this will take away. This is a factor, and this is one of the challenges that we will be faced with. For example, women. The areas of women in most mosques aren't very large. So obviously there's going to be prioritizing for example, the brothers during Jum'ah. So there's lots of groups that we will have some challenges to address and some issues to deal with. And I think it's very important for the trustees and for the leaders of the mosque to sit down and to see where are the challenges going to be in their individual mosque, and how are we going to address that particular issue? So, for example, we fall into the category of the most vulnerable. The main minority is the people who were, you know, affected by this pandemic. So maybe drawing attention to that, telling them why are they the ones that we are asking them to stay at home, and maybe taking precautions. So you could allow some kind of after the risk assessment, after the competent person look at all the risks that are involved and decide that this can happen, or you've got to be strict at times and just for the safety of the majority have to deal with the emotions of the minority and move on.
Thank you so much. I'd like to ask one other question to Hamid Azad from the Muslim Community Association. Whilst mosques have been acting as community hubs and holding food banks and things during the pandemic, how have masjids been able to stop individuals who are volunteering from going into the masjid, from praying, from using the masjid as a place of worship whilst they're volunteering and helping?
I'm sorry, so my video is not, I think, are you controlling this from there? But from my side, I'm not.
That's okay. If you just like to run through any advice that you have on this.
Yeah, this all actually depends, as I mentioned in my presentation, depends on how you actually train and communicate with our people. You know, if you have actually proper training structure and proper communication model, it should not be a big problem. Of course, there will be some challenges. That is why we need to have actually volunteers to manage the volunteers, and those volunteers must be very trained, very patient, and very cooperative. And through that process, I think we can minimize the risk. And plus, in terms of communication, if you actually communicate our people properly, there we are going step by step. You know, now we are actually providing the fundamental support to our people, and the next step, when the situation is safe and secure, and we are actually trying to open the mosque as soon as possible. And all these things, it's actually at the same time, we need to restore the hope among the people so that their frustration is not working there. We need to inform them that step by step, all these things, all steps we are taking, it is to reopen the mosque, inshallah. As soon as mosque is safe for you, for all of us, mosque will be open. So we need cooperation from each of the volunteers and each of the community members in order to make our mosque safe, in order to ensure safety of the overall community. So this is why I say it is actually plan, review, action, plan, action. This cycle we need to maintain. If you can maintain this cycle and on a very regular basis, we review and take immediate action, and every action we communicate with our people and community, I think this should not be a big problem, inshallah.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'd now like to move on to our next panelist, Ala Khandakji from the Muslim Council of Wales, please.
Assalamu alaikum, bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Jazakallah khair for inviting us onto this webinar. Muslim Council of Wales, we try our best to work with all the different communities and mosques within Wales. And alhamdulillah, we've been hosting All Wales meetings ourselves over the last few weeks, actually months, throughout Ramadan as well. And throughout it, we've been also in close contact with Welsh Government. And the first thing we try to do with everybody is go through some principles. Without actually repeating everything that's already been said, mashallah, everything is in alignment. But the principles that we went through are, if you can go to the next slide, please. These principles we set out because we didn't want to go into the discussions of should mosques be opened, but it's more of a when and how it is safe. So our first principles that we agreed as a community in Wales is that mosques are an essential part of our community and they need to be opened, but only when it's safe to do so. So there is no dispute around that, alhamdulillah. And the second is the preservation of health and life is a key objective in our religion. And when we are reopening, this is the first consideration that we need to take into account, and we really want to have a unified approach, but this doesn't mean uniformity. So a unified approach is different to having everyone being the same. So this is taking into everyone's individual requirements and requirements as such. So that's these are the principles that we've agreed, alhamdulillah. And Welsh Government have put together a traffic light system. And I don't know if a lot of you realise, but in Wales, what happens in England doesn't apply, and we haven't got a date set for when Masajid will be reopened. At the moment, we're in the black zone, and we're looking at when we will be moving into red. However, we've had consultation with Welsh Government, alhamdulillah, and meetings with the First Minister about what this actually means. And over the past week, like many others, the individual worship has not been applicable for mosques, and we've been able to feed that back, and they're currently looking at clarifying that. So we've undertaken an exercise over the last couple of weeks with the Masajid representatives, where we looked at how these traffic light system actually applies for mosques in Wales. And this is what we came up with after a couple of consultations with everyone. However, it's still draft, and we're still looking at it. We're still trying to get more clarity over what it could look like and what the rules and regulations. At the moment, we're looking and focusing on red and amber, and what the differences would be. We're looking at potentially rephrasing what red would look like, and we're in constant communication. We're sitting on the task and finish group with Welsh Government on getting more clarity on this. So yeah, we're putting forward the views of the Masajid that we've been having meetings with. Something else we've been working on is, so the traffic light system is ultimately governed by the government, and what we've been working with our communities is how to be ready. And I think that's the most important part of this, is to have everything in place. So we initially put up a few steps. That's come out completely wrong. But the few steps that we had was allocate the COVID safety officers, and alhamdulillah, we've had the majority of our masajid allocate a COVID safety officer, and we've now set up a weekly task and finish group with our COVID safety officers to share best practice, as well as sharing any risk assessments that they conduct. So last week we had our first meeting, and the risk assessment was the first task that everyone's set out to complete within their own mosques at all Islamic institutes, as well as calculating their new capacity. So we're looking, if you take the rule of a 2 meter squares is only one person, so they might have been 10 people, but now it's one, so you're drinking it down to a 10% capacity. So everyone needs to look at their new capacity, and this will be covered in your risk assessments. We need to identify the equipment or any resources, and also the training. So this is a very high level initial task, but it's aligned, and we've been working closely with BIMA and MCB on the new guidance coming out on the steps to reopening safely. And I think it's really important. I'm just going to make a quick note that it's when we're doing this at the moment, currently everything you're hearing is around the red phase, but we need to also look at amber and green. So our action plan, last slide, thank you. We're trying to put together a unified and strong response to Welsh Government on consultations and our weekly meetings with the Masajid. We're working closely with MCB and with BIMA on developing guidance and infographics, as well as training. We've put out an action plan, and we're looking at how we can support Masajid with the funding as well. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Ala. I'd now like to move to another area of the UK. I'd like to call Omar Afzal from the Muslim Council of Scotland to join us, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah. So the Muslim Council of Scotland, we're an umbrella body of mosques, madrasas and Muslim organisations in Scotland. We represent across the country, and we're also non-sectarian, so represent across the various traditions. The main bulk of our work is representing in the media. We represent with government and statutory organisations and on interfaith platforms. So lockdown, Ramadan and Eid, as with the rest of the UK, was unlike anything we'd ever known up here. But I'd like to actually commend our Muslim leaders and imams in the way in which they rose to the challenge of that and the strong and sensible leadership that they've shown throughout this pandemic. When MCS made the heartbreaking call for masajid to close, we also issued a call to action for them, for the massages, to make sure that they stay relevant and active within the relevant communities, both in terms of reaching out to their musallis and also in terms of reaching out to the wider community as well. So we saw, alhamdulillah, an amazing response in terms of the amount of online content that went out there. And alhamdulillah, there was an amazing amount of outreach work as well done through third sector organisations and collaborations across the country, from the Highlands, Inverness, right the way through to the West Coast and Ayrshire. You saw Masajid reaching out and helping various members of the community, Muslim and non-Muslim. And alhamdulillah, in Scotland, we had the first of its kind, the Eid transmission from Glasgow Central Mosque, which went out on BBC Scotland. And a small request to everyone in this webinar, if you could leave positive feedback on the BBC website for the show, because Miktat Versi and Sister Zainab Ghulam Ali will attest that even though nobody's giving positive feedback, there will most certainly be people giving negative feedback. So it's important that we show the BBC that this is a positive piece of programming for our community and we want to see more of it. So that's just a small request to everyone that's on the webinar. The situation now is very similar to other parts in the UK, where there's a strong will in the community now for us to return to our places of worship. The general public are very keen for that to happen, and it's something that MCS has been thinking about basically since we went into lockdown. So last month, Nicola Sturgeon released a route map for easing lockdown restrictions in Scotland. Places of worship fell into, at the start, phase 2 of that roadmap. We're currently in phase 1. So phase 2 is where places of worship will be open for private prayer with physical distancing and hygiene standards. They're planning to allow marriages and other types of ceremonies to take place with a limited number of attendees. Phase 3 is where places of worship can open to extended groups subject to physical distancing and hygiene standards. And phase 4 is where we go back to some kind of semblance of normality. What is clear just now here and probably in the rest of the UK is that there needs to be significant behavioural changes in order for us to stay clear of the virus. The virus is very much still out there, it's still dangerous, it's still infectious, there's still deaths occurring, which means masajid need to take precautions to protect musallis, imams and volunteers. So this is where it's important that the strong and sensible leadership that was shown going into lockdown is shown as we ease out of lockdown. The guidance that's been produced by the MCB alongside other umbrella bodies and with the input of medical professionals is absolutely critical in us getting to that stage where masajid are ready to open. If, for example, we go into lockdown and we're moving at a different pace from the rest of the UK, if we go into phase 2, for example, on the 15th of June with everyone else, we don't expect every masjid to swing their doors open. It's up to each individual mosque now to risk assess, to look at how quickly they can get to a point where they are safe and compliant and able to fulfill the obligations that they need to in order to open up. So there's absolutely no pressure on masajid to swing their doors open. What we would advise is to look at the guidance that's being issued and to look at that as basically a 3-step plan. There's 9 steps in the guidance, but you need to split it up into 3 distinct sections. One section is everything that you need to do to get to a point where you are able to open. And that actually serves a second purpose, which is where it's going to inform your decision-making process as to when you're going to reopen. So the two actually have a symbiotic relationship, and it's important that we look at it as that. So you need to look at what we need to put in place in order to get the masajid open based on the guidance that's being released. The second part of that is how you then manage a situation like prayer, the coming and the going. And the third thing is having contingency planning in place, because as I said, this virus hasn't gone anywhere, and there is the very real chance that we could go into a second lockdown, or there is a second surge of this virus. So we need to be prepared for those eventualities as well. So as a community, we need to be prepared, we need to be safe, and it's crucial that the places of worship do reopen for congregational prayer. And this is something that we're speaking to the Scottish Government about in terms of clarifying what individual prayer means, what private prayer means, and how we can best we can incorporate an element of congregation into that. As I said, what's going to be critical in that is that masajid are prepared, and crucially that the general public is prepared as well for what the masajid are putting in place. I think the most effective tool to do that when we're talking about communication is to have a video where there is a walkthrough from start to finish in terms of how the musallis are going to come to the masjid, what they can expect outside in terms of maybe a queuing system or having to pre-book. Then what happens when they go in with their shoes? What happens when they go into the Jamaat area? What happens during prayer? And then after that, how we then leave the building in a safe manner. So I think the best way to actually do that is to have a video walkthrough, which you can then share with the public. And I think that in terms of getting masajid who are at different stages in terms of how able they will be to put these things in, it's important that as umbrella bodies, all of us continue to engage with them, provide them whatever support they can, particularly those who may have committees who aren't in a position maybe to train volunteers, that we are able to put them in touch maybe with other masjids in their local area who can help them with that, and to share good practice wherever we see it. Finally, I'd just like to say a big well done to everybody in terms of how they've handled the situation and the community, and in terms of the strong leadership that's been shown, the sensible leadership that's been shown. And I think it's really shown our community in a positive light. Moving forward, coming out of lockdown and also beyond that, it's going to be important that we maintain that. Council of Britain and our umbrella bodies is going to be a critical component in that. The guidance, when you see it, it will be very simple, very easy to read, it's very easy to consume, and it's very easy to action. And that's deliberate, because what we've seen over the last couple of months is other organisations' guidance can be very heavy in terms of content. Specifically thinking back to when we were doing guidance on funerals, and you had documents which were into the 40 pages. So the guidance here is very simple, very easy to action. Please look at it as a guidance both to implement, but also something that's going to inform your decision-making process as to when you open. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us all safe and allow us to populate our masjids once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And just to reiterate, that guidance that Omar is referring to will be published tomorrow by the MCB. It'll be available on our website, mcb.org.uk/coronavirus. I'd now like to call on Ijlal Khalid from the Federation of Student Islamic Societies to address us, please.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Right, perfect. So the Federation of Student Islamic Societies is an umbrella body for all the ISOCs in the country. We have about 130 affiliates across 7 regions, from Scotland, Ireland, North, Midlands, London, Wales and West to the South region. So we have about 130 affiliates. We specifically work in the higher education sector and further education sector. So we work with Muslim students in universities and colleges and sixth forms. So for us, the same guidance does not apply in often cases, as we are working with university students, we are working with prayer rooms, and there is guidance that's going to go out specifically around universities and how they are opening. As an organization, we've been in touch with our membership, we've been working with them, we've been communicating with them, and as universities have shut down, universities are in lockdown as well, we can't really issue guidance up until we know what universities are doing. So what we did was, a few months ago, we formulated an impact assessment to basically understand what are the issues and impacts that Muslim students are going to have on the ground in the university spaces when they come back to uni, and would prayer rooms open? If they do reopen, what sort of issues we would have to be aware of? And I think some of the things that we identified were that universities might not be that willing to open up prayer rooms because there will be a phased opening of universities. In a lot of the universities, what is happening is they are only opening teaching spaces in September, and they're not opening up social and communal spaces up until January time. That's the guidance that's coming out right now. This is not set in stone, but this is what we're hearing. And we've also heard that with prayer rooms, the issue is because community spaces aren't going to be open, and there actually might be lesser students coming onto campuses as well, because a lot of universities are making it optional whether students want to come onto university campuses or they don't. And a lot of students might choose not to come to the university. We also see that because of the disproportionate impact of COVID on BAME students and admission rates as well, and now A-level predicted grades to be used as the things that get you into the university, we might see lesser BAME students coming to the university, we might see lesser international students coming to the university. So universities do have a chance to make a case to say that there's going to be less Muslim students around, so we don't need to open up these spaces immediately. And we have heard that sort of narrative coming about. So we're still trying to understand what is happening on the ground and what would be the best option for our membership. And I think one thing we have realized is there are going to be a lot of threats as well. If prayer rooms are opened, health and safety risks that will be there. But in addition to that, universities manage the prayer spaces on campuses. And because of that, if there is some sort of security mechanisms put in place or some sort of surveillance mechanisms put in place, there are obvious risks around things like prevent, as well as that's going to impact students on the ground. So we just need to be aware of that and manage that in a way that is taking into account the well-being of our membership. But right now, what we as forces are doing is we'll be launching a needs assessment for all our ISOCs, the 130 ISOCs that we have in the HE sector. Through this needs assessment, we'll try and figure out what is happening on the ground, what are the different dynamics and specificities in different universities, how are the universities reopening, how are the students' unions saying that how ISOCs need to function going forward. So that would help us get a more holistic picture of what is happening on the ground, and that would feed into the guidance that we prepare around prayer rooms as well. And some of the initial things that we are hearing are things like prayer rooms might not open in September, might open towards the end of the year, or where we are hearing that prayer rooms might reopen. The sort of plans that the universities are putting in place are around similar to mosques, that there would only be one person allowed in at a time, well, those spaces would be closed, and things like that. So we're in a phase right now where we're trying to do the analysis to figure out what's happening on the ground. But that's it from our side in forces. And I know we are looking to see what guidance comes out from the Muslim Council of Britain as well, and perhaps use that to adapt it for prayer rooms in university campuses, and perhaps try and work with ISOCs to, if masajid are opening in a few months from now, then try and work with university management and students' unions to see if they could open up prayer spaces as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And someone in the chat raised that I'm sure lots of the advice that you're putting out would also be applicable to businesses or companies or organisations that also have prayer room facilities. So I think that will come in handy, not just for students, but more widely as well. I'd like to now call Tawfiq Kasimi from the Muslim Welfare House, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So thank you very much for inviting me today. Muslim Welfare House is a national charity. We have about 16 centers all over the UK. It was established in 1968. And alhamdulillah, we didn't close 100% the centers or stop the activity. The activities just switched to online activities. For example, Taraweeh, we had Taraweeh online every night. We had Salat al-Eid, Salat al-Jumu'ah every night. We had, during the lockdown, the Imam and the caretaker at least doing the call to the prayer and praying in the mosque every time. We didn't miss a single prayer. yet the public was not allowed inside, so closed from outside, but was still open inside, and the services were still open. Many of the classes transferred through Zoom, and most of the activities were either by phone or online. Alhamdulillah, we managed to provide the average of 200 meal a day for the vulnerable people through Ramadan, and we still happen until today. I say an average of 600 meal a day, which is a lot of work and require a lot of volunteers and staff. Therefore, we had to take care of our volunteers, so they were allowed to pray inside where they were serving the community, but we've keeping social distancing, so they only they were allowed to pray in a small group, smaller groups, and by observing I respect the social distancing. During this lockdown, we did a lot of work at the centers. One of them is deep clean the whole building, and surely most of our centers need deep cleaning. We had to sanitize everywhere we could, reorganize the centers in a way that respect the social distances, create one-way system. So inshallah, once we are able, until now they're saying individuals can pray and the opening should be on the 15th, but we don't have enough guidance and clarity to how is this going to be practical and how is going to be possible. Muslim Welfare House is part of a bigger organization, which is the biggest mosques here in London, which is called the Coordinated Meeting, and it has East London Mosque, Central Mosque, many other large mosques, and we will not open at all if we think there is any risk. We will take all our precautions first, and keeping close if it's better, we will have to keep close, and no risks should be taken until we are 100% clear. And we will not take individual decision, the decision of opening or closing, even if the government will ease up the lockdown, we will take a collective decision, not one by one. And that line, I think it should be the line of MCB as well. So we decide to open all together. We shouldn't allow one mosque to open and another to be closed. That can't be. And we need also to make sure not to give to those people far right or anyone else, give them the opportunity to criticize us or to make us responsible for what's happening. We created one system, one-way system in our mosque. So that is just to reduce the number of contacts between people. Social distances is creating everywhere. There is marks everywhere. The mosque will be open 10 minutes before the prayer, closed 10 minutes after the prayer. Only 100 people were allowed. By the way, we used to allow 2,500 people in our mosque in Finsbury Park, but Muslim Welfare House. But from now on, only 100 people were allowed. We will make sure that the Imam will keep reminding people about the new guidance and the new rules at the mosque, and it is in their own interest. By the way, it's going to be very, very tough to satisfy our brothers and sisters as well, because sisters are allowed. I remember before we closed down, and that was before the government asked us to close, I told the congregation, anyone who is over 65 shouldn't be allowed in, and please, for your own safety and safety of others, stay at home and you get reward, same reward. And one of the brothers stood up and told me, why do you ask me not to come to the mosque? He said, you may die or cause other people to die. He said, yes, that's what I want. I want to die in the mosque. I'm going to be shaheed. Never stop me to come to the mosque. So we have this, unfortunately, kind of mentality whereby people, they want to die in the mosque, so you can't stop them. You can't really stop them, but we have to reorganize it, work with it, and try to fulfill their expectation by giving them a proper guidance. And therefore the Imam is so important, and also many means of communication. All the social media will be used to make sure people understand these new rules and guidance. 3 security will be engaged, 1 outside to control the crowd, 1 inside the courtyard, and 1 in the middle, making sure people are not praying the sunnah inside and allowing other group. 3 Jumu'ah prayers will be organized, but again, only 100 people will be allowed in instead of 2,500 people, which will probably create a lot of unhappy people, but we'll do as much as we can through the communication and social media to please them. And it will be based on first come, first serve. People will have to wear masks at all the time while they are inside. They will have to also bring their own mats. If they don't bring it, they will not be allowed in. We will provide sanitizers ourselves at the entrance, and when also they are leaving from the other side, they will be provided by that. And again, the places will be sanitized after each prayers. The schools will remain closed until September. We don't know until next notice, but the online through Zoom, the classes will be continued. We have decided, we had many meetings through this time, and we decided to combine Maghrib and Isha, and our Imam will produce a new fatwa very soon. We will publicize through the social media to combine Maghrib and Isha until 20th of August, and possibly beyond that, to reduce the risks. And the mosques will be not open after that. In terms of the offices and the other services that we were used to provide, like translation, working with the council and other things, this will continue, but all the appointments will be online or by phone or by talking to the staffs through the doors. This is the actions, the practical actions we have taken. Once again, I will say lastly that we will not open if we think there is any risk, and the opening of our Muslim Alpha houses will be collectively through in coordination with the other mosque, and we will never open on our own. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. I know people are sending in questions. Please continue to send in questions. We may not have time to address them during this session, but we'll answer them and send you out the questions and answers via email tomorrow. I'd now like to call Kahir Alim from the Council of Somali Organizations, please.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. MashaAllah, it's been a very important session in terms of what we are experiencing in relation to this new era of COVID-19. I think one of the greatest issues is the challenges in building resilience for our communities. The Council of Somali Organizations works with over 100 plus Somali-led charities. We are an infrastructure building organization which operates nationally. And one of the things that we are really concerned about is the impact of COVID-19 on our mosques and also on our community, but also in general, the reality of that there hasn't been any process for people to grieve the deaths during this time, and especially when the mosques are closed. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the key questions, I think, for looking as a community are what are the challenges we face? Obviously, reopening the mosques, many people talk about, many people have better expertise than us, but I think one of the key challenges is that during this lockdown, there's been a lot of issues in relation to communities not being able to grieve and not able to show grief. I think this has caused a lot of stress and a lot of mental health issues. And also, I think the key question is how well are we placed to respond? And we have to respond in the future. And COVID-19 is really, I think, one of the things that, this is just really the first stage in terms of looking at, for example, the impact. The government's furlough scheme seems to have mitigated some of the dire economic consequences, but it's not going to continue. And we're going to have to build some way of looking at building resilience in long term. And the key question then is, how do we build that resilience? Next slide, please. I mean, for a lot of charities, I think what we find is that before the crisis, demand for service was increasing, and a lot of the charities were financially struggling. And, even the lockdown period now is almost 3 months. So, the question really is, how long more can it continue, and the impact of that and how they're going to change. Next slide, please. Now you'll see there's been potential impact on income. Events like the London Marathon lost 66 million. Individual givings fell by 11%, and 1.36 billion lost in income and trading. And a lot of charities who depended on using their space to rent out have now suffered from cash flow problems. Next slide, please. Now, the previous slide, please. Sorry, I think you went one ahead. Yes. Now, UK charities are estimated to lose 4.3 billion income over the past 12 weeks only. And also this means that many face increased costs in tackling the outbreak. You know, and there'll be a lot of, while there have been responses from donors and funders and the government, I think for a lot of our charities, and especially smaller charities, you know, the consequences will be dire. And you can see that it's likely that we are going to have a very long, deep recession. Next slide, please. Now, the government has spent a lot of money fighting COVID-19. It's estimated that they have spent 350 billion. Now, some of that money obviously is borrowed money, and that money has to be repaid back. And then there's a long-term consequence of that, which will impact on education, research, and on charities, and also, you know, increase competition for funding. Next slide, please. The UK in general experienced a recession about every 10 years, and the last one was 2008. Now, even if the coronavirus doesn't trigger a lasting recession, there's still Brexit, global trade disputes, and the growing impact of climate change. It's not if, but how soon. And unless we are less resilient than we were before. Now, all this comes down to income streams, and probably, you know, all these will fall for a lot of the charities. Next slide. So what are the solutions? I think the first thing, you know, is to be strategic, to look at new ways of working online. And this also goes with mosques, because today we're talking about just reopening initial phases, but, you know, without test and track, and also the testing, without, you know, these are just really just touching the surface in terms of looking at the impact, looking at, you know, how we're going to progress. So I think without really a viable vaccine option, we are going to be living with the virus for a very long time. Now, the next thing is obviously to ensure that you're planning in a robust way, looking at the future, looking at, you know, just not what the initial steps are or what the initial guidance are, but also looking at long-term what this means. And also, especially when you look at how to help people grieve. Now, one of the things we're looking to do is basically set up the first UK Somali language mental health helpline, and among other things, and also train more people in mental health awareness. And these are things which are going to be important in mitigating the effect of the coronavirus on a long-term basis. Also, I think one has to be prepared to make unpopular decisions, but which are driven by the impact. So it means that a lot of the mosques would have to move to more online services for a lot of long-term basis. It may mean that, you know, you can have services like the nikah and all that online. And a lot of the services will have to be tailored to minimize as much risk as possible. And also one has to look at managing the cost to drive, you know, to drive the impact and value for money. And obviously, you know, mosques need to think about how they replace like the donations that used to come from during Friday prayers or otherwise. And also they have to learn to exploit potentially the digital media in terms of, you know, Facebook and others, in terms of, you know, having, and some mosques are doing better than others. Some mosques are not doing, you know, so I think the impact will be more on the smaller mosques.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. You've raised some fabulous points, and I think they're all really important points to consider, but we do have 3 more
I've finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry.
I tried to speed it up, so it's like.
Thank you so much. If I could now ask Sheikh Noor Mohammed from the Council of European Jamaats, please, to address us.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. First of all, is to thank Almighty God for giving me this opportunity to be part of this very important interactive session where we learn from each other. And secondly, of course, to thank the Muslim Council of Britain for showing leadership. I think MCB has done exceptionally well, most especially during this unprecedented and challenging time. What was expected of you, you delivered it without a shadow of doubt. And we at COAGE are humbled by that. So I represent the Council of European Jamaat, which is commonly known as COAGE. We have 11 centers across the UK and 5 across Europe. Because of time, I'm just going to be very brief. I'm going to touch on 3 main things. What did we do? What are we doing? And what we are planning to do in the near future. And for those who do not know me, I am the head of Islamic Culture and Religious Affairs at COAGE, and also the resident imam of one of the affiliate organization of COAGE, and of course MCB, which is here in Birmingham. Most of our centers suspended programs earlier before government's announcement of lockdown. Some suspended 2 weeks before, based on the advice we got from the medical practitioners and experts within our communities. And so the moment the programs were suspended, they were all transferred to online platforms. But one thing I need to mention here is that most of our centers have been live streaming for many years. So it was very easy to transfer all programs to online platforms. And immediately task forces were established and formed by most of our communities. You know, task force for COVID-19 and task force for COVID-19 funds. The one for COVID-19 was mainly made up of medical practitioners amongst our members. And then the other one was to reach out to those who were in need of any support. And then we had weekly, regular virtual meetings from composed of the leadership of our organizations to share practices. And that really helped a lot. And during the holy month of Ramadan, like in the case of any other organization, all programs were online. Friday were virtually online up until today. And we even had iftars where the food were taken and distributed to the members of our communities, you know, by the volunteers within our communities. What are we doing now? We continue with what we've been doing. And the regular meeting now is on 2 weeks basis. It's no more 1 week. And so 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, leadership meet, deliberate and discuss and share practices of what needs to be done. And lastly, what are we hoping to do when it comes to the reopening of our mosques? Most of our bigger centers are not planning to open very soon. Yes, they are waiting for government guidelines and at the same time going through the MCB guidelines. But there is no plan for our big mosques to be open anytime soon. We're taking our time. The smaller mosques are planning to open, and they've got some few guidelines depending on what MCB circulated and also what the government will be sending across. Number one is to contact insurance companies to discuss what can and can't currently do based on government guidelines be covered. So they are busy discussing with the insurance company to see what is feasible and what is doable and what is not doable. Secondly, they are looking at appointing COVID-19 safety officer, which is also very, very important. And thirdly, the programs will continue online for the most vulnerable within our communities, meaning the elders. And then of course, number 4, looking at marking out carpets to highlight 2 meters spaces. And so these are some of the guidelines that they are putting on. And of course, in addition to the risk assessment, which is going on. And so thank you so much for the opportunity. And I wish you all the best of luck. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Sheikh. And you raised a really important point about working with insurance companies and making sure that that organisations are covering all bases in that way. And now let's call on Maruf Adeoye from the Council of Nigerian Muslim Organisations, please.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. My name is Maruf Adeoye. I'm the Amir of the Council of Nigerian Muslim Organizations in UK and Ireland. And CNMO is an umbrella body that represents the interests of most of the Nigerian Muslim organizations in the UK and Ireland. We first of all need to appreciate the work of the MCB under the leadership of Brother Arun Khan. May Allah continue to bless them and give more knowledge to direct the affairs of the Ummah. In most cases, we tend to rely on the guidance that come from the government, come from the MCB, and we use that one in order to come up with our own relays, which are basically in order to make sure that everything we gather together, we now adapt it to the use of our own community, which are the Nigerian Muslim community. So the most important thing for us is that which our ultimate goal is to protect and save lives. So by doing that, what we've done so far is to set up a committee that will look into the reopening of the mosque. When it comes to the issue of our membership, some of them do have their own mosque. Some of them, they share mosque with other mosques. Some of them, they just hire a place in the public to conduct their, in some cases, Juma services, or in most cases, they don't, because they don't have their own place, so they hire places whereby they use on a weekly basis. So my message to our members is that they should be proactive, and there's nothing short of being prepared. They need to prepare for opening their masjid. We are waiting for the committee to come back to us, hopefully by this coming Tuesday, to get a feedback from them on what we should be telling our members in terms of reopening either the mosque or going back to what we refer to as a salatu that they do on every Sundays in most cases. In preparation, among those things is that we emphasize on consultation with the stakeholders and the stakeholders are mainly their members. We are an umbrella body. They are organizations that they have members, the grassroots. So they should have consult them, including the public that use their services, and making sure they carry out a risk assessment. You notice that everybody has been talking about risk assessment, and that's the beginning of most of the things. They need to carry out the risk assessment in order to find out the situation in which they are at present, in order to be able to plan ahead for the future. They need to assess the resources that they have at the moment in order to be able to find out what are the shortages in order to be able to open. And the main thing is that they should only open in as much as they know that they are convinced enough that they will not jeopardize any safety, because they own the community the duty of care to ensure that the opening will not create any chaos. Based on their need assessment, they can then request for any kind of support. We are there as an umbrella body to support them, also with the support that we also get from the MCB. So they need to do this in advance in order to be able to ensure that they have everything that they need in order to be able to reopen. They need to test whatever the system they have in place to make sure that it's working and it achieves the objective before they can then decide to go ahead and open the masjid. What we are saying to them again is that they need to carry out regular review of whatever the system that they have in place. So in order to ensure that they improve on whatever they are doing. And those are the kind of things that we are working on. When we get the feedback from our committee that's looking into it in more deeply, then we'll be able to now come up with a release that will be sent to them for them to be able to, as a suggestion for them to be able to adapt to their own particular needs. Because all these various organizations that we have that we cater for, they all have their own particular needs, and they all operate under different structures and systems. So that's where we are at the moment. We are still working on making sure that everybody do their best in order to be able to make use of the government guidelines, the MCB guidelines, and our own release as well. And we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and remove this pandemic. And we should all continue to share the best practices that we all have. And in order to find out more about what we do during this pandemic and what we do in the future, you can make a direct contact to myself on my telephone number, which is 079-579-30.
Sorry, if you don't mind dropping your contact details in the chat facility, then anyone can access them.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And all I can say is that prevention is better than cure, and we should all work towards saving lives. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to call on our final panelist, Adris Sharif, who is representing the UK Islamic Mission, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear respected brothers and sisters, I'm conscious we haven't got much time left, so I just want to offer a slightly different perspective from UK Islamic Mission. We're one of the oldest charities established in 1962. We've been going nearly 60 years. And because of our makeup, I just wanted to share with you some of the best practice that we've implemented, bearing in mind that nearly 50% of our 50 or so masjids and branches across the UK have implemented eye care food hubs and services that are external facing as well as serving internally our local communities. So one of the things that we've focused on is we have a large volunteer base. So we made it absolutely critical at the beginning of the lockdown to ensure that we protect our own volunteers, and that any policies that we put in place in any phase of opening the masajid, we ensured the safety of our volunteers. And the reason I say that is because a lot of fantastic work has been done throughout the last 12 weeks. And we should recognize that. And we should recognize that when we start talking about health and safety, risk assessments, those should already be in place. These should be nothing alien to us. And one of the key things that we need to focus on is building trust with our local government departments. So, for example, we in Birmingham, for example, here in Birmingham, and by the way, when I speak on behalf of UK Islamic Mission, but I also speak as a Nazim, a president of a local masjid here in Birmingham. So we are very aware of the practicalities and the pragmatic approach we would need to implement in order to address these issues of this fundamental issue of what we're calling the reopening of the masajid. But actually, in a lot of cases for UK Islamic Mission, the masjid has never been closed because we've offered other services. So one of the things that we've done in Birmingham is we work collaboratively with other masajid, 50 or 60 other masajid as a group. We've created good relationships with the Director of Public Health, with the Birmingham City Council, with the coroner, with the West Midlands Police. Because one of the things that we have to be aware of is that when we take these steps in order to open our masajid, then we need to ensure that we are compliant with not only government guidelines, but also the law. And so it's important that we build this trust with our local authorities so that they understand what it is that happens inside the masjid. We talk, all of us have been talking about all the individual issues, the practicalities. But what we forget sometimes is that we are familiar with our masjids. other people who have charged with implementing the governance and the enforcement of these rules may not be familiar with what happens inside a masjid. What are the actual, what's the structure like? Is it's open space? How do we perform our prayers? What are the different activities that go on? For example, it's been mentioned earlier that communication is absolutely clear. Managing expectations is absolutely clear. So if we think about the guidance that even the small message that came out last night on BBC News around the reopening, so much misinterpretation of what that means is already being fed back to the masjid committees and the masjid trustees. So it's really important that we continue to develop those channels of communication, whether it be through our Jummah khutbahs, whether it be online, through YouTube videos. We need to carry on and ensure that it's really critical that people understand. And when we talk about people, we're talking about our namazis, we're talking about our children, we're talking about the impact potentially on our madaris, the fact that we're carrying out our classes online. At UK Islamic Mission, we had an education team meeting yesterday where we talked about how we're going to implement exams online for our children as well. So we shouldn't close off our thinking as to how do we continue the functions of our masajid and our madrasas. But today, the key thing I wanted to stress was the importance of relationship building, the importance of training, so that our people who are charged with implementing this know exactly what they need to do. And I do think some of the questions that we need to raise have to be around the cost of compliance, because everyone's assuming that we've got this limitless amount of money that we can implement. We can free issue PPE equipment, masks. We can deep clean. When we talk about even a limited opening of the masjid, have we got the resources? Does it mean that we have to perform a deep clean of the masajid once a day, once a week, after every salah? So there are practical issues that we still need to have addressed. And even the questions around who can come to the masjid, these are things that have to form part of our assessment of what are we able to perform within the masjid safely for everyone. And that safety officer that we've talked about is key in that. And the other thing I wanted to stress was the approach we've taken in Birmingham is a very collaborative buddy system. So where you have smaller masajid, they are being assisted with best practice by an older brother masjid. So I think that's something that you could look at, where we don't want masjids to be open in a piecemeal fashion, I would suggest, because that would put undue pressure. Say one masjid had a capacity of 1,000 people. Well, if that's the only masjid, it will put undue pressure on that masjid to open alone. So we do need to have a coordinated approach. And the other thing that we have suggested to our local council is a pilot scheme. What we've asked is, why don't you come and observe how a small congregational prayer might be implemented? Come and observe, you observe our risk assessment, and then you advise back to us where you think we might need to improve. And I think if we can build that relationship and have these pilot schemes put in place, then that will help us ourselves as well develop those practices that we need to put in place. So the other thing that I did want to stress was the masjid offers lots of services, and it is a sanctuary, and it's a special sanctuary for our elderly. And they are one of the most vulnerable groups that we have. So what we need to think about is, when we open the masjid, how do we make it practical for the more elderly who really do want to come, who may not have any symptoms, but within the regime of PPE and health and safety, we need to try and accommodate them so that we don't just exclude people just because of their age. So I just wanted to share a few perspectives, a slightly different perspective to what we've been talking about earlier, around the need for organizing, the need for planning, the need for a structure, and most importantly, we need to have clarity. We need to be able to communicate to our namazis, to our congregations, male, female, elderly, and children, so that they understand what are the restrictions we're facing, and also how will we be measured, how will we be governed from an enforcement point of view as well. So hopefully, inshallah, that's given a bit more of an idea of other things to consider, inshallah, as well as the other important considerations we've heard from our other panelists. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Adris. I'd now like to ask Hassan Judy, Deputy Secretary General of the MCB, to close for us, please.
Thank you, Zainab, and thank you to all our panelists for their contributions. Appreciate that we've run slightly over time, and our apologies for that. We'll finish literally in the next 3-4 minutes, inshallah. The only thing really that's left for me to say is some really useful insights that I hope we've all heard from today from the panelists, and the questions as well that have been asked in the chat. Any questions that we haven't been able to answer during today's session, we will be going through as much as possible today, tomorrow, and writing up answers in a mini FAQ. And if you registered for today's session, you'll get an email tomorrow, inshallah, with that. So rest assured, we'll try to answer as many of the questions that you have asked in the chat as possible. But like I said, I hope the last 90 minutes has been useful, with advice, with nuggets of best practice about what other organizations, other associations are doing across the country for their respective members, and hopefully helping you to think and to feed into what your organization can be thinking and planning ahead. As I mentioned at the start of the session, today was the 4th of 4 feedback webinars that we have hosted this week to share best practice, and we're going to be reviewing all the feedback, or we have been, and we'll finish reviewing all the feedback from these sessions to feed into the updated MCB guidance, which has been drafted for the past couple of days, and we'll be finalizing that, inshallah, in the next day or two. Currently planning to issue it tomorrow if there aren't any other major surprise announcements by the UK government or elsewhere. And that will include template checklists, risk assessments, some posters, and hopefully a wide variety of useful information. And it's not going to be everything, and no doubt there will be more things that will need to be produced based on your feedback and advice and suggestions for the rest of June. I think we all appreciate that June is going to be a busy month for all of us. The last 3 months have been already very busy, and the next few weeks will no doubt be busy, but in different ways. I'm just going to hand over now to Brother Harun to say thanks and closing remarks.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, video. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Jazakallah khair, Hassan, Zainab, and I'd like to give special thanks to everyone who joined this call today. This brings to an end this is the 4th webinar now, so covering, alhamdulillah, the entire UK, working in partnership with all of the organizations listed in the program today, from all the umbrella bodies, the regional mosques that we've had throughout the entire week. Just wanted to really express our thanks and appreciation to everyone for partnering with us in delivering these really important and vital events that we've been holding whilst in lockdown. The community is looking for real guidance and support, inshallah, and I hope that these webinars have been useful for everyone to raise questions, but also to gain answers and solutions. And as Zainab mentioned, inshallah, the guidance will be published tomorrow, inshallah, for everyone's benefit. And if there's any further feedback, please do reach out to us. Make dua for MCB and all of the organizations and institutions that are working very hard really to come out of this lockdown and really for the betterment of our communities, inshallah. So inshallah, may Allah accept from all of us all of the contributions that everyone's made, and for everyone's support, only to please him, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much, Harun. And just to reiterate, this session was recorded. It will be uploaded onto YouTube shortly afterwards. To access any and all of the resources the MCB has produced, please visit mcb.org.uk/coronavirus. Thank you so much for joining us today. Assalamu alaikum.